accelerating Europe. We just had a meeting in the kind of speakers room, and we couldn't really get out of the speakers room because they spoke too much. There's a lot of passion on this panel. One of the things that I think has cropped up, I mean, I wrote a piece for Tech.eu recently that you contributed to, was how difficult it is to set up a company in Europe. I am a co-founder of a prop tech proposition called Home Truth. We've been working on it for 15 months. But I can incorporate, and we will incorporate that company on Thursday. It's going to take 5 minutes to do so. And I think that this is very difficult in Europe. I'm going to start with you, Benoit, because I know you're very passionate about this. What is the big plug to stop startups? Is it that money to begin with? It takes 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you need notaries, is that right?
Yes, so thank you, Monty. The thing is, when an investor comes to Europe, they discover 27 systems, and a lot of large countries like Spain, Italy, and Germany have a very outdated system for the digital age. And when investors invest in tech, they have expectations, and the expectations often are US dollar aware, which is a main form of US tech companies. And then they discover a notary system that is totally outdated, especially in Germany and Spain. And in Germany, you have to sit and listen for hours to a notary to speak the bylaws and to describe. And then you have another layer. Each investor in Spain or in Italy has to have a tax ID, but you cannot get it digitally. You need to a 3 months process and have a queue, go to a police station, fly 11 hours. All this maybe are not very interesting topics, but on the ground, they really produce one issue we have in Europe, which is a GDP gap with the United States. Because most tech founders, probably many here in the room, they know that at some point this becomes unacceptable for investors, and they just ask you to move to US Delaware or UK sometimes, but mostly to US Delaware. And these are, you can look at it as a half empty or half full glass, because it's very easy to fix if there is a political will.
So how do you fix it?
You fix it by giving a right in Europe and the European Union to speed and to common sense. And so what I call often the 10-second investment process. Europe has been very successful. I just had a coffee now with the head of policy of Stripe International just before. And they are the number one, so founded by Stripe by 2 Irish. And they are the number one, I think, creator of US dollar companies, because they are allowed to do it all online directly from the Stripe website.
Yes.
17% of US dollar were companies, so probably number one creator are actually Europeans who make it happen, a European-made company. So I think the future is US dollar ware is a very old system, still the number one. There is an opportunity, and I worked with you and with those panels also, to push for a change, and we can leapfrog that in tech.
Absolutely. Adine, sorry, I didn't introduce you properly. You've been a founder, an investor. Tell us about you.
Well, I had a bit of a short while being in Parliament, Dutch Parliament, as a PA to one of the members of Parliament, thinking here is where the change happens. But I was far too conscious that things were going slow. So I moved in as a tech founder a few years later. Been a tech founder for 7 years afterwards, transitioned into an investor role as a B2B SaaS investor. Yes.
And you're Dutch?
I'm very Dutch, yes.
One of the things that's useful for me as someone who's just about to raise money is that for angels, up to a certain point, it's tax deductible in the UK. Is that the case in Holland? Is that the case in Europe? Is it the same across Europe?
Well, obviously, we're talking here about 20-something different systems, so the answer is no. And getting angel investments, I remember doing this in 2014, was a nightmare. People not understanding the concept of a convertible loan agreement, for example. But still nowadays, it's very hard to find money at the friends, fools, family stage. I think it will help if you make it tax deductible. And this also binds into, we need a new generation of tech employees who've done well who put their money back into the ecosystem. And they are now currently taxed on their option plans where they didn't have a liquidity event. And that should also be changing. Yeah.
So this is changing. Benoit, Adine, you're both saying that there's problems, but it needs to change. Chris, El Patron, in my phone, El Patron. Not a man that gets behind the shades. You have some very strong opinions, and I think one of your motifs or one of your bon mot is copy with pride. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I think we spend too many commissions, too many best practices, too much talk and too little action. I think we have a unique opportunity. We had an enemy, that was Putin, and now we have an adversary, which is Trump. And that's how actually people come together the most, right? But one thing Trump has shown us is you can actually execute very quickly. In 1 month, you can actually change the world if you or kill it also. So I think we need to become much faster. And one of the ways is finding that if UK or Estonia does amazing digital creation of companies quickly, copy it everywhere. If there is tax rebates that we know about above 30%, as they did in Italy at some point, or how they do in UK right now, it works, make it all across, right? So I think there is so many things that instead of trying to be a bit better than your neighbor, we just need to copy with pride, execute at an overall level, and compete in much more important things to keep the talent that just basically try to be better.
Copy what?
Copy every system that works. So if digitally in Estonia you can do it online, you can do it on video conference with a notary if you still need it. If it can be done within hours, if it can be done with an e-residency all across Europe, just copy the same system. Ukraine is copying the entire system of Estonia. Just basic right now, just copy-pasting basically the same system and eliminating what they had was extremely old and not working and full of corruption, and they just put in right now the same Estonian system. It works. Do it everywhere.
Yeah. What happened to like Estonia? You were doing a lot. Has that been successful?
Extremely successful. There is tons of companies.
As well.
There is more than 100,000 people creating companies in a country of 1.3 million. There is actually changed a lot of investors are happy investing in an Estonian company.
But do you still have the red tape as an Estonian company that Benoit was referring to?
I don't think so.
No.
Again, during COVID, we could actually have video conference with the notaries when needed. Nothing stopped it. Actually, it accelerated almost from day one because everybody understood the advantage to actually do it this way, right? There were some people still going to the notary and suddenly realized, oh, we can do it on video.
Absolutely.
So I think there is an idea about, let's accelerate, copy with others are doing this. A lot of smart people in Europe we need to do, and now Europe also, we were talking before, the UK is back to Europe. So this actually helps us to get the UK back to Europe, to add together, and I think it's a unique opportunity.
Okay, great. Patrick, how are you, man?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think we were reflecting before that I think the election of Trump triggered a bit of like a defensive mentality in Europe where we felt like, oh, we were under the cosh and things we were taking for granted like were fundamentally shifting. And I think in the past few weeks, things are beginning to change where you're seeing more of an offensive mentality. I know Project Europe is a great example of that, where I think people have thought like, well, we're not.
Sorry, does everyone know what Project Europe is? Hands up. Not quite a few. Can you explain Project Europe, Dan?
So it's a new kind of pro-European. It's quite similar in some ways to Entrepreneur First, and it's backed by 100 or so unicorn founders in Europe, and it's like unashamedly pro-European.
And it's acting with speed. It's doing it quickly.
Sorry?
It's acting with speed.
Yeah, they've got it up and running really quickly, and I think they're looking for candidates now. And I think that's part of this kind of more kind of this mentality shift where people are trying to take pride in Europe and push, like, whether that's mobilize this kind of this more pro-European sentiment to drive change, whether it's in regulatory terms or risk-taking at an individual level. Like, there's a real shift, I think, going on that hopefully we can basically make the most of this opportunity rather than shying away from it.
I understand. Well, I mean, I don't want to mention the C word. The T word, Mr. Trump. There seems to be obviously controversy about what's going on with Musk and everything like that. I don't really want to focus on that so much. But the narrative has certainly changed, right? Now, I believe, I have heard that there is a trend in the US that people are starting to incorporate in Europe as opposed to the US because of this cataclysmic change. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so I think I would have hoped that that would be true, but I'm worried like there may be a gap between what I kind of hope and the way the world actually is. But then this morning, there's a founder we've just backed, a Ukrainian team in cybersecurity, and they're San Francisco based. And this morning they said they were flipping from being a US company to being a European company, which I have literally never heard of before. In 10 years in venture, I've never heard anyone doing that flip. And they said that their US law firm said it's not the first time this week they've had a discussion with a US firm flipping into being a European firm. And it's because their sense of security as individuals, and this is obviously a Ukrainian-American team, and there's the sense in which those individuals feel secure, even in SF, where there's like broadly the kind of liberal consensus, you might think of like technology that used to be on the West Coast is kind of coming apart at the seams, and those individuals now feel more secure building businesses in Europe. And that comes back to my point of feeling more secure, feeling like we need to seize this opportunity to really press that advantage by driving the regulatory change that's required.
To be honest, I think if we would do something very financially attractive, I think a lot of Americans would come to Europe and build their companies here.
Yes.
I don't think that's
Such as
crazy.
doing what?
Well, I think in Amsterdam we still have the 30% rule, so meaning you don't pay over 30% of tax, making our housing prices go up, by the way, immensely. Don't like that. But yeah, no, we took in so many highly skilled tech people because of this, and it really helped our ecosystem.
Is there also, I mean, I don't want to talk about America, for God's sake, but I mean, free capital, right? 75%, I don't know, like pension funds and all that type of free capital. In the US, it's some ridiculous figure of like 75%, and here it's 15. Could you explain that kind of coefficient, that difference?
Yeah, so what we see, if you see all the capital, how much is in the banks and how much is on the free market and available for corporate lending, corporate investment, liquidity, basically. In the US, that's 75%.
That's
and
crazy.
Here it's around, I said 15, I was even debated on that.
It was 10, but anyway.
10. So that's a very low amount. And what you see, I don't know, I can't speak for every country, but in the Netherlands, we see pension funds not touching venture capital as an asset class.
Okay.
But just complementing on that, I think it's more worrisome. Europeans save more money, so home consumers save more money than Americans. Actually, I think it's 1.2 trillion, but only 10% of that is moving to capital, the rest is in deposits. And out of that 10%, 300 billion go to the US stock market. Like, if we will move the money from the stock market that the Europeans put in the US to Europe, we finance half of what Draghi says it will cost to put Europe back to this one. So it's in our hands. Of course, we need to make it attractive, but why we keep investing in the US?
Yeah. And the answer to that is because you have 27 capital markets. And so if you are a fintech, you are in 26, you are Conto, it's much easier today, even if you're headquartered in Europe, to propose to your clients, as they do, to invest in NASDAQ, because it's one capital market union, than connected to 27 different stock markets and how you invest there. And one of the things we are pushing also, and I'm pushing, and this is looking good actually.
Explain what you're doing, so I didn't introduce you properly.
So maybe you can follow on X, Twitter, euacchq. I'm also on Blue Sky, euacchq. And I've been a voice, and I also repost and share opinions of founders, of investors on how to make Europe more competitive and attractive for talent. And one of the things we see in the GDP exodus is because Europe didn't take seriously being a welcoming place for founders, right? And so the whole life cycle, it all starts at the beginning because what you were saying, Adine, is angel stage is very important. When people put 5,000, 10,000, 20, 50,000, they want to take a flight to see a notary and other things. And this really kills from the beginning, or create a US dollar company where you don't have. And once a company has moved out of Europe, the cost to bring it back and to do the IPO in Europe will be much, much bigger. So that's why we think the beginning is very important, and the life cycle, all the way to IPO, obviously, where we believe it will happen and we want, is that these 300 billions stay in Europe because there is a lot of huge, great IPOs of tech companies in Europe, and that's what we're working. And I talk with the European Commission, with European institutions, and also national, to create awareness, because often historically...
Or political awareness, right?
Exactly, because they are not aware of their world in a way.
Can I just add to that? Is that's the early stage that we're talking about, but later stage like Series B, you see half of the investment rounds are done by US investors. And that's the exodus that we're talking about. And to set up a Series B company, or Series B fund, is really, really hard. There's not enough liquidity at that part for founders to get, but also to create a fund there, not a lot of LPs will go for that.
And you set one, right? So you speak from...
I speak from experience.
Exactly. So, and that's where the saving and allowing more of the savings to stay will allow, and if there are more IPO options in Europe, that has an effect on the early stage companies, because if there are like next year or in 2 years 10 IPOs of very good returns, then the people who did the exit, being tech founders, their teams, or the investors, start to understand, okay, I can invest in headquarters in Europe because I will have an exit, and I can pitch my B fund. It's all an ecosystem we have to create.
I think I will let Patrick, because he's always the one who speaks the least on these ones, and he always has very good opinions that we only talk afterwards. But I think you touched this morning on the chat about something, which is the liquidity at all levels. So of course there is IPOs, but it's sad to see that companies in the 1 million, 2 million, 5 million ARR, all of them have been acquired by US companies. Yeah. So the European companies are not acquiring companies should be also growth part.
European startups want to be bought by American companies.
Yeah, so like we need to basically create liquidity at all levels, and European companies have to buy companies. They're all being acquired by software. A small acquisition doesn't matter, it puts liquidity, but if you put liquidity and you move the employee to the US or start working for an American company, you're losing a lot of that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Patrick, you're nodding.
No, I was just thinking.
Are you sleeping?
We've kind of flipped through regulatory regime, like talent inflows from the US, growth stage capital. It feels like these are what we're stepping through as the pillars of like a healthy startup ecosystem.
Yeah. Okay.
And it feels like what we're being driven towards is how do we think of this in the same way we think of nationally critical infrastructure, which is like we need independence from other countries. We can't be dependent on any particular third party beyond Europe. And we need to be thinking along the same terms, the startup ecosystem. So like, it's great that we have US growth stage capital here, definitely, the more the merrier. But like what we've seen with other parts of like the economy that we've previously depended on is like we have to be self-sufficient. And I think to your point about it being hard to raise a growth stage fund, like we do need European domestic growth stage funds in case like, God forbid, like the money from the US dries up.
But it sounds like we need a cultural revolution where Europeans start investing on the stock market. We sound as if we're being stymied by lack of political awareness. I mean, I was in the House of Lords 2 months ago, and they basically nearly kicked me out because I questioned this AI for idiots presentation that I was shown. Do you know what I mean? And I know what that type of angry thing is. Are you seeing any kind of loosening up of governments or the EU or...
Yes.
I mean, the UK is actually trying to do something at the moment because they were left such a mess. But is there any... Let's have something positive. I mean,
so I'm very cautious, and one of the things I'm cautious is to have nice laws with nice names, which we are good at in Europe, but to really have results. So I try, when I talk with authorities, is have a more KPI result-oriented, more like what article or how many exodus, how many headquarters are moving, how many IPOs, what the market cap. Start to talk like this with politicians. It's not going to be easy, but we're working on it. But I think also necessity is where the half-full glass is so many governments have too much debt, so they cannot finance with public debt, so they need private money, and suddenly it becomes interesting to have a good capital markets and have headquarters. And we talk about autonomy, and then it becomes very weird or pathetical that if you have autonomous technology on many topics, to have the headquarters outside Europe. And suddenly you need to fix the whole supply chain. And I think they start to realize, but what our job, all of us, is to keep the pressure up and to create awareness.
Yeah, okay.
I've just one very positive thing to say, that I see ministers of digitalization popping up.
Yeah.
And they're coming together in Amsterdam this week, 13 of them. I think it's very positive that give it a big name in the governments, give it a lot of people in the government, and it will, yeah.
The Ministry of AI.
If we need that, let's do that.
Yeah, but also let's not change perspective or let's not lose perspective that one thing they are killing the US is diversity, and we are right now here 4 different nationalities just on the panel, and I think that's a superpower. And I think we keep talking about fragmentation, but I think it's the diversity, and they're killing it. They're killing it even within races, even in the US, not talking about nationalities. I think this is the superpower that can actually put the talent, which at the end of the day is all about talent. If you keep the talent, we make it. And I think the diversity is our superpower that we need to retain and defend and take to the next level.
We're out of time, which is annoying, because this could go on. But let's leave with some optimism. Patrick, what are you optimistic about it's now or never?
Yeah, about that we have hit this inflection point. And I think we're like, I mean, for the first time, I seem to be part of conversations with friends who talk about buying European. I don't think I've ever had conversations with friends who have, like maybe, you hear people in France say buy French, or in Spain say buy, but people talking about that, like pride in the continent, I think is like a really positive.
Mega, make Europe great again. Mega, there you go. Chris, final words, positive.
Defense, not running away from defense, being a huge innovation engine that everybody has done before and we haven't. So I think to me that's also another area of optimism.
Innovate with pride.
Yeah, innovate with pride, but using defense without, it's a source of innovation, let's not shy away.
Benoit, come on.
Yeah,
Genius now.
Now I think the word accelerate is even used by politicians now, as one of our goals. So there is a real awareness, and at least on the official agenda, doing a pan-European company law to do the capital market union, it's official in the agenda. And now we have to make sure the implementation is fast and very well done.
Thank you. Adine, last word to you.
We have 500, we have so many more people, like we are a front, if we see it in consumer behavior, in talent. I think with climate tech, we have outpaced the US by far. I think we have a lot to be proud of.
Good.
And,
we have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah.
Copy with pride. Mega. Benoit. That's all we need. A round of applause for my amazing panel. Thank you.